Good morning, I'm Mauricio Ramos.
I'm Kevin Graber.
I'm Zintis May.
As you further your journey into coding, you would have many roadblocks where your code doesn't seem to work. Once you reach this certain point, you would have the internet as your most trusted ally. But as powerful as the internet may be, it still may not give you the right answer that you're looking for. Many of you would have multiple pages cluttering up your browser, which could be a problem. This is where community code comes into play. Community code is a sophisticated application where you type in a certain key term and it will be stored into the application, and it will give you the sources into the application without having more pages into the browser. And it's an application where everyone can see what's stored into the application, and you could vote whether if it's helpful or not. We use the APIs of Stack Overflow, YouTube, and Reddit. Stack Overflow being one of the main pages where we go to where we're stuck in coding. Reddit is one of the biggest social forums out there that covers a wide range of topics, especially in coding, and YouTube, which covers more of the visual aspects. Sometimes when you read a certain article, you still may not understand what the writer's trying to say. So a video, would make it easier to see how the code is being done.
Hello, everyone. So we're going to go with the design of the site. Initially, this was actually supposed to be a website about Marvel superheroes and looking them up and what movies they've been in and so forth, but that didn't last very long because we had a lot of problems with the APIs of that. We ended up going with a website which was able to poll a group of people and allow all the users to contribute some functions to this table, which would be sortable and searchable. Because I found that when I came to class, that very often I would learn about a function that I just didn't know existed. And if someone else had known about it and had put it up on a table like this so anybody could reference it, they'd find out about all these little gaps in their knowledge base. So what I did more or less, or what we did rather, was we created a way to insert and rate the different functions that exist, and it would have what the function is, the language, description of what it does, and how to write it, as well as a bunch of pre-built resources here on the right. Also, it has a voting function on the left that allows you to basically grade them based on how useful they are to you as a student and a coder. Yeah. So do you want to do a little demonstration?
Sure. So I'm going to be going through the code and giving a bit of a live demonstration at the same time. So is there a way to make this smaller to zoom out? All right, cool. So this first chunk of code here basically deals with how people upload something to our Firebase database, and we can give you a description right here so we can have a test function. And then when you click submit, it pushes it up to the Firebase. The values of all of these text boxes are stored as variables, and then that's pushed up to the Firebase. And each new entry is given a starting score of 0. Is that not working? Okay, and so you have to scroll to the end, and you see the test function that we put in is at the end because we initially sort by rating. One of the coolest things that we have with our website, though, is that we're using a data table, and so it's completely searchable, and you can sort it by all the different fields. If you want to, for example, just grab items that have to do with strings, you can search, and it'll pull up all of these functions that have to do with strings. The next major part of our code is we have this Firebase onChildAdded event, and what that does is when you first load the page, it runs through this code for every single child in the Firebase, and it also runs this code when you add a new child. So when somebody puts the information in here and clicks submit, it's going to run all that code again. And basically what all this code does is it dynamically creates this table, and we do it piece by piece. So first we create the row, and then we create TDs for each of these entries, and then we populate the TDs. And so first we create the buttons, and then most of this is just grabbing data from the Firebase. So the function name and the language and the description and the syntax, that's all fairly straightforward. That's grabbed from the Firebase. But these resource buttons that are making the API calls, it gets a little bit more difficult there. So Basically, when you click one of these buttons, it makes an API call to the respective website. So if you click on the YouTube button, it's going to make an API call to YouTube, and it's going to have a query URL that is based on the function method, or the function name or the method name, and the language. And so it's going to search YouTube for .push and JavaScript. And one of the things that we found it was necessary to include both of these terms, because a lot of times if you were just searching for one of them, you would get something that was either too specific or something that had nothing to do with the function at all. Okay, and you'll notice that we're using modals in our code. And when we create the link, we have to add the data toggle and data target, because that's what triggers the modals when you click the link. So the main differences between the YouTube API and the other ones, we're only grabbing one result from the YouTube API, whereas we're grabbing 5 from Reddit, and oh crap, that's just a test function. We're grabbing 5 from Reddit and 5 from Stack Overflow. And so the way that we had to accomplish that was we used a for loop. And you can see here that we loop through the first 5 results that we get, and we grab the title of the post, and we grab the URL, and we generate these links dynamically and then put them into a list. And so if you want to see, what is that, KeyPress, you can click and it'll give you a bunch of things about KeyPress from Reddit, a bunch of articles about KeyPress, what people are talking about KeyPress on with Stack Overflow. And one of the challenges that we had with this project is that to get this data table working, you have to run a function. And we tried a ton of different ways to get the function to work. But the problem that we ran into was that the function would run before the data loaded from the Firebase, and so that it wouldn't think that there was any data in the table. And so the way that we got around that, it's kind of a hack to get around it, but we set a timeout, and so it gives the web page a little bit of time to load the Firebase data before it runs the function that's going to turn the table into a data table.
We actually were using a sort table function previously, which wouldn't break the table in the way that the data table would. But we learned about the data tables, I think, last Wednesday in class, and found that they had incorporated a search function that we had wanted to incorporate very easily. It's just that it runs after the page loads and then changes the form of the page. Accommodating for that was actually really difficult, because we had a lot of CSS that Mauricio had contributed that had a different style and layout. For example, it had this background initially, and it had a blue and black motif. But whenever we tried to run the data table function to make the table more usable, it would always make it white, and this part was black, and like we didn't have the time and knowledge to work through the specific style guides for the data table function. But it does allow us to search pretty easily. As far as what my code does, or my portion of the code that I mostly contributed, the functions all have a rating, and one of the details of that is the ratings that are particularly low will actually get removed from the table. So once something hits -3, it'll delete the entry from Firebase and from the table. For the other ones, you can upvote and it'll show green, it'll downvote and show red. And that was actually kind of an interesting decision for me, because I was trying to figure out a way to allow a user to upvote just once for each entry on each page. And I thought about the different ways of doing it by putting a Firebase entry for it, or having a local variable. And the way that I ended up solving that to allow users only to have one vote per use was to actually just have the upvote function reference the color of the rating in the element, which feels a little hack. But I mean, if someone's pushed up, then it's going to be green, and we know this one's going to be green. So when the button gets clicked again, it's just going to look at that, and it already knows that they've upvoted, so they can't do it again. The other part was that there was a series of parts in the code near the end of it, which have a bunch of functions which allow you to do the upvote and downvote process, which was actually a little more involved than I thought it would be initially going into it. And I don't know, so now we have, if we want to, as a class, we can contribute to this and produce a repository of all the functions and knowledge that we've accumulated so far.
That's our project, and community code has an unforeseeable future where the possibility is endless, and we're going to continue on making the application even better so that way users can continue using our service.
Yes.
I think it was an aesthetic thing. I mean, you just have one. This is like the most relevant YouTube link, and then here we have like the 5 links. I mean, it's just something that we could change. One of the things we were thinking about actually going forward is that if we were going to spend more time on this project, there would be some sort of way to maybe select. We want to get like 5 results from YouTube or 10 results from Reddit or Stack Overflow or something like that. So that's something that could be changed in the future. But we just implemented it this way. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think we were having a problem. It only was a problem with one of the URLs. I think it was Reddit. But the way we got around that was we used a regex so that it would look at the function that you put in, and if there were any periods, which is the only character that I had trouble with, it would remove the period. And yeah, that was basically it.
Originally, we thought that we actually didn't do much Git merging initially before this week because most of us have worked on projects individually. We knew that Git would compare different sets of code, but my impression initially was that Git would then merge it for you if there was a conflict. Like you'd able to like click like I want to use this one, not that one. But then we found out that all it does is like identify where the problems are in the code. I think later on, what ended up happening was that I should have actually submitted my code earlier, but what ended up happening was that Mauricio submitted a CSS to Kevin, who had the master, or was the proprietor of the master, and then it got passed to me, who inserted like a handful of code that I've been working on, because my code was like pretty short and not invasive. But like, yeah, it just like had this like handoff process where like we knew the CSS would work, and then I just stuck my code in, and we made, I think we actually made another repo because we had a lot of commits, and yeah. But I mean, it worked out. It worked out in the end. I don't think we know Git as well as we would have liked to. Okay. So. Thank you.